You know, it's very interesting. If you've been following the letter of James, he's been very, very terse and succinct in his exhortation, trying to motivate believers, if you will, to live the life that they were called to in Christ. Don't allow jealousy and selfish ambition to dominate, because look what the fruits of that are. And he comes right out and says it. And yet, it seems to me today that you look around the world, and what is it that people laud in so many? Their jealousy and their selfish ambition. How selfish they can be sometimes, of wanting more power, wanting to dominate and to control, being prideful in themselves and standing up and just exhorting it over others to make sure that they can be crushed and put down. And then we applaud that. Isn't that a little odd? See, we're Christian. We are followers of Jesus Christ. And even Jesus Christ, he's been working with his disciples for how long now? And here we are more than halfway through Mark's gospel, and they're still arguing amongst themselves who's the greatest. You don't find that ironic? I mean, I kind of giggle at that, because these disciples are exhibiting that same selfish ambition. We didn't get into this because we wanted to be good spiritual leaders. We got into this because we wanted power. We wanted to be able to dominate. We were going to sit on the thrones, right? And yet we see so much of that. It's nothing new. We look around today, and sometimes we want to think that we're the first generation that ever had to deal with the problems of this world. How obnoxious we are to even think that. These kinds of things have been around since even Cain and Abel. See, here's the thing we've forgotten. Our nature is fallen. We human beings have a corrupted nature. Now, I know that's hard to accept because we're so prideful with our selfish ambition. I'm perfect. Nope, sorry, I'm not. I have to break the news to you. I'm a sinner like anybody else. And that corrupted nature we know about. And in that corrupted nature, we have to be aware that that nature itself tends towards sin. Left unchecked, you see what St. James was telling us. When it's left unchecked, it turns into wars and dissension and fighting and bickering and all the things that we see so often. And that is something that we do have to work at. We have to work at changing ourselves to understand. In 2 weeks' time, Jesus is going to use a phrase that I think is so telling. From the beginning. From the beginning, it was not so. See, one of the things that we forget is that we have a great tradition as Catholics. It goes back more than 2,000 years. It goes back to the beginning of time, where we spend all of this time and energy trying to understand the human person, trying to understand the corrupted nature, and trying to understand what it is that God is doing. What is God doing? So many people think God is not active. No, God is very active. God is very active in the world, and he's trying to work through you, through me, through everybody. If you say you're a believer, you have to believe. So from the beginning, we have to kind of work, if you will, to understand that we are not our own creator, that we do not set the tone, that we do not determine who we are. God does. So here's one of the things. It was a great book that I had to read when I was working on my dissertation. I wish I'd gotten to read it sooner because it was such a good book. Very, very difficult read, so don't go out and try to get one and read it yourself because he's just not the easiest author to follow. His name is Alasdair MacIntyre, and he wrote a book called After Virtue. You remember the virtues? The virtues are something that we as the Catholic Church have always upheld and have always said have a distinct place in our existence. And we broke them down into different categories: theological virtues, human virtues, cardinal virtues, heavenly virtues, lively virtues. We have different categories depending on how they fit in and how they work. And I'm going to leave the research to you if you'd like to go read the catechism on that. But suffice this to say, Alasdair MacIntyre, in this very long book, which was kind of disappointing in the end because he says, maybe I have to write another book because I don't think I've resolved the question, presents a very good question. Whatever happened to virtue? And he kind of traces a trajectory, if you will, of a shift in language. And to sum up a very complicated thing, what he's basically saying is the worldly, the secular, have usurped virtues for their own purpose, but have lost the language that undergirds it. They've lost what virtue truly means. And so what virtue started to become in a secular mind were just qualities that they wanted to see in somebody. Now, I remember when I was in one of my assignments, we had a school, and I was asked to teach the teachers. I had to do a 60-hour course with the teachers, giving them some instruction. And at one point, I got to this section on virtue, and I think it was a fifth grade teacher. In fifth grade, in their religion classes, they were teaching virtue. And this was back, the internet was kind of still novel, you know, they were still trying to work this thing out. She goes, oh, I found this great website. I said, okay, so I took down the information. It was called the Virtues Project. And when I went and looked at it, I had to admit, even then, before I had read Alistair McIntyre's book, I'm looking at it and I'm scratching my head and I'm going, what is this stuff? This is not what we teach on virtues. This is not what we understand. I mean, one of the virtues was assertiveness. One of the virtues was being aggressive. You have to stand up for yourself. These are qualities and descriptions of what the secular world wants to see in people. McIntyre says it was so subtle the way they took over our language that even we didn't notice it in the church. We started to espouse a lot of the same stuff. And what ends up happening in the end is when you lose the connection to what the virtues truly are, the virtues were God-given powers. And the theological virtues in particular, the divine virtues that are infused into us, have to be cultivated as God gives them to us. When we see pride rearing its ugly head, we don't laud that. How do we deal with pride? With the virtue of humility. And yet, could you imagine any of our leaders today exercising the virtue of humility? I don't see it anywhere. I don't even see it anymore in a lot of the young that are growing up. I don't see it in a lot of my contemporaries. Now, humility doesn't mean you become a doormat, but we as Catholics have to regain the sense of our tradition because in a lot of cases, we've been hijacked. We have to go back. You know, it's interesting. We have a great tradition. And that tradition had always had very strong philosophical pillars. That's what McIntyre was trying to talk about. We had these grand pillars on which we could build our understanding of God's will. See, my corrupted nature views the world through corruption. I can't see it perfectly, as St. Paul says in the letter to the Corinthians. I can't see it perfectly now because my own nature is corrupted. But with the power of reason that God has given us, we can get past that. St. John Paul II did it beautifully in the Theology of the Body, and I'll talk about that in 2 weeks. You have to pierce through. And how do we do that? One of the best ways to do that is to go back to the beginning, to peel away the corruption, to peel away and try to find out. Now, all of Scripture is a revelation of God. When we read it with renewed eyes, we learn more about what God desires from us. And in that, he does not want the deadly sins to prevail. He wants the virtues to prevail. Could you imagine if just even this group here exuded the virtues everywhere you went? What an impact we'd have. But because it's been somewhat hijacked and taken away from us, we have to be a lot more careful. You know, it's interesting. We are coerced into living a fallen life. Think about it. Like that first reading, again, this is not the first generation to deal with it. When you do stand up, and you know, like when I was a kid and you were in school and there was that one goody two-shoes, who got persecuted in the class? The goody two-shoes. Who got made fun of? But we have to start doing it. Let them make fun of me. If I'm doing good, I'm doing right, I'm helping others, I'm feeding the poor, I'm clothing the naked, I'm doing what is good and right, and I'm loving my neighbor as I've been loved by God. What is better than that? What is better than that? And when that happens, and it happens by all of us, the world starts to be transformed. Some virtues have to be acquired by habit. We have to do it over and over and over again until it becomes second nature to us. You know how easily sin takes over? How the deadly sins sometimes can just take over? And how easily we can do those? We've been practicing those a little too much. And so for the next couple weeks, we're going to try to scratch a little bit about what it means to look back to our origins. What did God give us before the fall, and what did God want of us before that happened? So in the coming days, maybe just spend some time reviewing all the virtues again, the theological virtues, the cardinal virtues. Start there. Maybe look at the virtues that oppose all the deadly sins, those lively virtues that help us to combat sin, to defeat sin in our lives, those things that we can start taking on so that we can start to show forth that, yes, we believe in Jesus Christ. We are followers of Jesus Christ, and we're not looking for worldly ambition. We're not looking for that jealousy and that selfish ambition. We are a people who truly want to be in love with God so that we can go forth and love our neighbor. And that, my dear brothers and sisters, as you heard in the opening prayer, is the foundation of the laws and the commands that God gave us, the law of love. One of the greatest theological virtues that we have available to us that is common to anybody, whether they're a believer or not. So let us be the ones to live it the way God asked us to. Go forth, learn a little bit more about the virtues again. Go read that third section of the Catechism and see what the Church has been saying virtue really is about. And then we can undo what Alistair McIntyre saw. We can once again reclaim that great tradition of virtue that we understood were more than just qualities that we wanted in somebody. They were powers given to us so that we can truly live as a human person, a person who was created for love and to be loved. God bless you.